working on specific words to help us with positions of structures on the body, this list is going to work in groups of two. So one word will mean one direction. The other word will be the exact opposite. Our first two, anterior and posterior. Anterior is going to mean front. Posterior is going to mean back. You're also going to see these words in parentheses next to them, ventral and dorsal. Ventral means belly. Dorsal means backside. So in human anatomy, these are almost the exact same words, and they mean essentially the same thing. But more often than not, you're going to see anterior and posterior. And so humans are bipedal, meaning they stand on two limbs. So in humans, the front side of the body is also the belly side, and posterior is also going to be the back side, same as dorsal. These two words, ventral and dorsal, the difference between anterior and posterior is more relevant in a course where you study an animal that is quadrupedal, meaning they stand on four limbs, and the front of their body is going to be different than the belly side, and the posterior side is going to be different from where their back is located. So that's where it's a little more relevant, but for our course, they are essentially the same thing. But more often than not, you're going to see anterior and posterior. Our next two, superior and inferior. Superior will mean above. Inferior means below. Our next two, we have medial and lateral. So medial is going to mean closer or towards the midline. Lateral is going to mean further away from the midline. So what is the midline? The midline is a line going directly down the center of your body. So draw a line going down through the nose, all the way through the belly button, just all the way down the body, dividing it into a left and a right half. That is going to be what the midline is. So medial means it's closer to that line, whereas lateral means it's further away from that line. And so if we're thinking about it, our ribs are going to be closer to the midline than, say, our thumb. So the ribs would be more medial, whereas the thumb is going to be lateral. Our next two are superficial and deep. Superficial is going to be closer to the surface, and deep will be further away from the surface. And so for us, that surface is going to be the skin. So superficial is closer to the skin, whereas deep is going to be more internal to the body. The next two, proximal and distal. Proximal will mean closer to an attached base or point of reference, whereas distal is further away from that same point. So if we're considering our arm, it attaches to our torso through our shoulder. So our shoulder is going to be the most proximal part of our arm, so it's closer to where it attaches to our body. Whereas our fingers are the furthest thing away from where our arm attaches to our body. So our fingers would be the most distal structures on our arm. Another word you should add to your list to help you out with some structures that actually have this word in their name is transverse. And this just means side to side or across. So here are some examples that we'll work through together again. See if you can pause the video and figure out these before we go through them. The first one, the face forms the blank surface of the head. So if we're thinking about it, the face is on the front of the head. So our best word for that would be anterior. The ears are positioned blank on the head. So now the ears are on the outsides or furthest away from that line in the center of the head or the midline. So our best word for that would be laterally. Next one, the umbilicus or belly button is positioned blank and blank. So if we're thinking about the belly button is found on the front of the body, so anterior ventral would be the better word for that. And then also, it's right on that midline, so it'd also be medial. So anterior / ventral, and then also medial would work best for that example. Talking about planes of reference next, these are invisible barriers or lines that are going to cut the body and divide them into different halves, and it's going to help us figure out how different structures are positioned in their relationship between two or more structures. The first one is the mid-sagittal or median plane, which is going to go right through that midline, and it's going to divide the body into an equal left and right half.